"Mark is just a coworker," said my wife as she left for her corporate dinner. That night she slept at his house. When I discovered everything. Hey folks, before we jump into the video, please consider subscribing and giving a thumbs up if you're excited for more stories like this. Thank you. Let's dive in. The signs started subtle, almost invisible at first. I caught the changes in how Sarah talked to me, how her laughter would cut off abruptly when I walked into a room while she was checking her phone. Look, I'm not the most trusting guy in the world, but I'm not paranoid either. My wife had always been transparent and direct with me even during our worst fights. But in recent weeks something in her eyes would just go dark when she looked at me and light up when she stared at that screen. I remember this one dinner when she got a text message and she looked at it and smiled, but instead of responding she just turned the phone face down and powered it off completely. That gesture left this bitter taste in my mouth. When I asked who it was she said someone from work, like it was no big deal, but her answer came too fast, too rehearsed. So I started paying closer attention to details. Fridays didn't seem to exhaust her anymore. She'd wake up earlier and put more effort into getting ready and leave with this unusual energy for spending 8 hours at the office. Plus she started coming home later, and sometimes she'd warn me about extended meetings and other times she wouldn't even bother. When she'd get back she'd go straight to the bathroom where she'd stay longer than normal. Then one day I came home without warning and she was on the couch with her phone, and she jumped when she saw me, asking why I was there and why I didn't give her a heads up, like I'd interrupted something sacred. I apologized, but the damage was done because I saw her fingers quickly locking the screen, and nothing about that reaction was innocent. Then came the constant defensive phase where if I mentioned she seemed off she'd claim exhaustion, and if I pushed she'd explode asking if I was going to interrogate her now, which she yelled one night when I commented on her excessive phone attention during dinner. Every attempt to get closer turned into a fight, and all our conversations ended in silence or accusations that I was insecure and monitoring her. But it wasn't insecurity, it was intuition, and I felt it in how her body tensed when I hugged her and how she'd hide her phone under her pillow. We slept together, but her mind was somewhere else. Then came that memorable Tuesday when we were watching a movie, which used to be something we did with wine and laughter, but this time there was none of that. Her attention kept jumping between the TV and her phone until suddenly she announced with fake casualness that they had a team dinner Friday for the new client. She said it without looking at me, avoiding my reaction. I nodded without asking questions, but something inside me activated, something that had been growing for weeks. I stayed quiet on the outside while inside I was already planning, because I wasn't going to stay passive. That night while she slept next to me I stayed awake watching her. She breathed peacefully like she wasn't hiding anything, but I couldn't forget her nervous fingers on the keyboard or how she'd stopped telling me about her day. Friday was approaching, and with it the opportunity to know the truth. For the first time in a long time I was also scheming something, not surprising her with flowers or romantic dinners, but following her. The worst part was feeling no guilt at all, just the need to know if I'd already lost her. Friday afternoon was strange because she was animated but not with me. She spent the whole time texting while we cooked, and when I asked if it was her sister she answered without looking up that it was work stuff coordinating for tomorrow. Everything revolved around that cursed work dinner, and she talked about how well they were all getting along lately and how the boss was finally recognizing them. She mentioned several familiar names except one. She said Mark's name with a smile I hadn't seen in weeks. The weird thing was she didn't give details, just Mark's going to, like it was just another fact, but she said it hastily like she needed to get it out, and that name kept spinning in my head. That morning while she slept I did something that made me feel bad though not sorry. I quietly took her purse and checked her planner, but it was empty. Then I found her charger and plugged in her phone, and with trembling fingers tried her usual password, and it worked. The call history was clean, too clean. The WhatsApp chats looked normal except one contact with no name, just numbers. When I opened it the history was deleted, but the profile picture remained, showing a cropped image of someone's face in a dress shirt. I didn't recognize him, but something told me it was Mark. I closed the phone and put it back exactly where it was. I went back to the bedroom feeling like we weren't just the two of us in that space anymore. Saturday morning was even more revealing because she woke up early and spent longer than usual in the shower. She chose clothes she hadn't worn in months and did her makeup with care she only reserved for important events. She hadn't even put that much effort into our anniversary. I pretended to keep sleeping while watching her through the mirror's reflection. She was restless, kept looking at herself and practicing smiles. At 8 she kissed my forehead saying, "Don't wait up for me, okay, I'll probably be late." I nodded without saying a word. When I heard the door close I got up, dressed quickly and left 10 minutes later. I followed her in my car, keeping a safe distance. She headed downtown, parked in front of an office complex, and went in hurriedly. Nothing unusual so far. I waited in the car and the hours dragged by painfully slowly. Around 6 she came out with 4 people, 3 women and 1 man. I immediately recognized the guy from the photo, Mark, tall, well-groomed, fitted shirt and that attitude of someone who knows he attracts attention. My wife was walking next to him. They were talking very close and sharing laughs while the others walked a few steps behind. They headed to a nearby place, one of those spots with dim lighting and ambient music. They all went in and I stayed watching from the corner, not knowing how long it would last but determined not to move. Almost 2 hours passed and the group started breaking up. First one coworker left, then another, until it was just the 2 of them. They were laughing and their hands kept touching on the table. He leaned toward her and my wife didn't pull away. I felt a mix of disgust, pain and strange calm. It wasn't surprise but confirmation. She was there with him by choice, not by chance or work obligation. I waited until they got up. They left the place, she hugged him briefly and they got in a car together, not hers but his. I followed them no longer as a jealous husband but as a witness seeking concrete evidence. What I witnessed squeezed my chest like a vice. Mark's car drove through streets I didn't recognize. They left downtown, took the highway toward the suburbs and entered a residential area with no businesses. No restaurants, bars or offices that would justify a supposed work meeting. I turned off my headlights, keeping my distance with knots in my stomach and hands gripping the steering wheel. I watched them park in front of a house with a simple but cozy facade. A private home, not a public or workplace. He got out first, walked around the car and opened the passenger door like on a romantic date. My wife got out smiling in a way I hadn't seen with me for months. She got out slowly knowing she was expected and took his arm. They walked through the yard together and disappeared inside. It was 9:15. I waited 1 hour, then 2. No movement, nobody came out and no more cars or colleagues arrived. That corporate dinner was a fabrication exclusively for me. At some point I considered ringing the doorbell, shouting her name, demanding answers, but I didn't, not out of cowardice but because something inside had already broken. I didn't want to hurt myself more by confronting a reality I already had in front of my eyes. I drove aimlessly, stopped at a gas station, bought coffee I didn't drink and went home like a ghost. The early morning felt eternal and every sound made me check my phone. At 3:30 I heard the key in the lock. I didn't turn on any lights because I didn't want to see her or hear excuses in that falsely calm voice she'd perfected over weeks. She entered with stealthy steps, left her shoes at the entrance like always and went straight to the bathroom where I heard water running. She was showering. When she came out she approached the bed and hugged me from behind like that gesture could erase everything, saying we had to take Marta home. She felt sick. That's why I didn't text you, my phone died. Sorry, she whispered sweetly, another lie added to the building she'd been constructing for weeks. I pretended to be asleep and didn't respond. I let her lie down thinking she maintained control. The next morning I got up early, made coffee for both of us, sat at the table and waited. When she appeared in the kitchen her eyes showed dark circles like she hadn't rested well. She sat down and smiled at me, the same smile I saw through the bar window. She asked if I slept well like nothing had happened and I nodded. I let her take the first sip of coffee before speaking. You know I was following you last night, right? Her cup started shaking as all expression disappeared from her face. She froze completely. I didn't stay home last night, I went after you, I witnessed everything with him. What came next was crushing silence. No denial, no quick justifications. She just hung her head and that's when I understood we'd reached the end. How long has this been going on, I asked. It took her a while before answering. About 2 months, it started as just talking then I couldn't stop it, he makes me feel things from before. I didn't raise my voice or cry. Her words came out with a frankness more hurtful than 1,000 excuses. I never planned it, it just happened. I stayed quiet because I wasn't interested in knowing her feelings toward him or her separation plans or if she wanted my compassion. Everything had lost relevance. The deception went beyond the physical. It covered every previous moment, the joys she no longer shared, the nights turning her back to me, the words covering up realities. I finished my coffee, stood up and while she stared at me I said my last necessary words. No more lies, don't share my bed if you're already sharing his, we're done. She stayed frozen when I walked away, remained there motionless pressing the cup between her hands. I walked to the bedroom, pulled the suitcase from the closet and started filling it messily. I heard her footsteps approaching, hesitant, cautious, walking through a space that no longer belonged to her. She appeared in the doorway while I collected pieces of our shared history. Are you really going to do it this way, she whispered. I paused my movements. What way would you prefer, with flowers, goodbye notes? You played me, thought I was naive, found my replacement while we shared a pillow. What did you expect? Her gaze was hollow, no tears, no visible guilt, just acceptance. She recognized having destroyed everything without attempting any reconstruction. She asked for dialogue, moderation in decisions, claimed confusion and fear of losing what we built together. But her arguments weighed nothing after seeing her get out of that car smiling, radiant like she hadn't been for me in a long time. Don't call this a mistake, I answered. Mistakes are one-time things that generate remorse. You made this decision repeatedly for weeks. That was my greatest pain, not the physical infidelity or her closeness with another man. What broke me was imagining their shared laughter, the moments when her mind was with him while she hugged me or professed love. Even the night before she'd whispered I love you when we went to bed. Lie upon lie, her affection was just empty echo. I left permanently that day, didn't wait for more dialogue, avoided screaming and destruction. I wouldn't give her melodramatic shows. I closed the door knowing I was leaving behind someone who was no longer mine and I no longer aspired to possess. I found lodging far away to reflect. The following days I spent purging, not physical spaces but mental ones. I deleted her contact, asked my sister to retrieve my last belongings. I attached a brief note with legal separation documentation. Explanations were unnecessary, our relationship wasn't love but cadaverous inertia. The biggest challenge was unlearning habits, waking up without her presence, not waiting for late messages, not hearing warnings about extended meetings. Quietude became my companion, quietude that hurt but liberated because while it left scars it eliminated the burden of daily falsehoods. No more speculating about who received smiles, no more jumping at notifications. Sure, it hurt, but it was clean suffering, not the toxic drip of previous months. Gradually I began my reconstruction without revenge or digging into morbid details. It was unnecessary to know about meetings or locations, it was enough to know she chose another while occupying my bed, sufficient. Broken faith doesn't admit patches with nostalgia or forgiveness, it simply breaks definitively. That day of the fictitious corporate meeting marked our true end, everything after was debris and finally I chose to abandon the rubble. After 2 weeks passed, she tried to communicate 3 times. First a laconic sorry with no context, then an extensive letter full of justification attempts for the irreparable, perceived loneliness, different looks, work pressures, confusion about crossed boundaries. I deleted everything without answering. The third attempt was a voice recording that I inevitably played and she was sobbing. But she wasn't sobbing from genuine repentance but like someone who'd lost control of that parallel narrative she'd constructed. She said she missed me, felt empty, that Mark wasn't what she expected, that our relationship was authentic. It made me laugh not from cruelty but from the ridiculousness of the situation because when you destroy something real for a passing illusion remorse comes inevitably but it was too late. I contacted a lawyer seeking simplicity not spectacles, just a clean and quick separation. We rented our place, had no kids, few shared possessions except memories and those don't divide equally, you bury them or carry them. She offered no resistance, signed in absolute silence. That passivity, that surrender without battle confirmed our relationship had died long before that night I followed her. It was already over, she just lacked the courage to confess it. She waited for me to discover it alone, like letting everything explode naturally would be less painful, but it turned out infinitely worse. Several mutual acquaintances asked what happened and I was sparse with details. I didn't intend to expose her publicly, not out of consideration for her but because talking about it made my stomach turn, not so much because of her actions but because of what she once represented. It's hard witnessing how someone you gave everything to transforms into a stranger who only provokes discomfort or contempt. There are betrayals that transcend the physical. She didn't just share her body with another man but also her time, her energy, her joys, her company. Everything that should have been ours she gave to someone else while I received scraps. One day I spotted her downtown. She was alone at an outdoor cafe absorbed in her phone. She didn't detect me. I watched her briefly. She wore that absent look I recognized perfectly when there are no emotions left, when everything fragile has already shattered. I walked away without turning back, not from pride but because our words had been exhausted. She no longer belonged to me and I was no longer the same. After that experience, trust didn't return easily. I couldn't give myself blindly. But I also understood something fundamental, it wasn't my responsibility. Maybe I wasn't perfect but I was loyal, and in these times when fidelity seems like an outdated concept it's a principle I maintain.